the number one thing is like manage your SKUs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are brands where all of a sudden I'm like, okay, girl, like you want to launch like 10 SKUs. Like, do you understand that that's 10 components? Like the inventory, just it all comes down to risk. So my best advice for kind of going in that direction in terms of you're in it for the long haul. That's kind of how I look at that. It's like a journey. Find success early, where it's like focus on getting $1 million SKU. Because again, it's like if you're launching 5 SKUs and you're a brand that just is launching and you're launching 5 SKUs, you get all this press. That won't happen.
Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Beating the Brand podcast. I'm here with Kathryn Paves, who is a multi-time founder, brand strategist, and operator who helps mission-driven consumer brands scale with purpose and precision. And as the co-founder of Areum Ventures, she brings deep expertise in brand development, fundraising, and go-to-market strategy, often serving as a fractional CMO, COO, or CEO. So welcome, Kathryn. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hi, I am equally excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I always like to say I'm everything but the FO.
That's
Stay
right.
away from the FO.
That's a tough one. That's a tough role to be in. So you and I connected through the board and I loved your story. I think it's so inspiring. So I would love to start with just rewinding the clock. Tell me, I remember you told me like you were 25 years old, you're pitching Tocca to Sephora, no formal roadmap, no investors, no idea kind of what you were doing at the time. What gave you the audacity to go for it and do that? And how did it actually work?
Yeah. I like to think there was definitely some naivete in there, right? Because looking back, knowing what I know now, I was like, how did I do that? And I think sometimes ignorance is bliss to a certain extent, especially when you're like leading the brigade of a newly founded brand and you are so focused on the mission of the brand that you kind of lose sight of the fact that like, oh, Sephora's never carried a brand this small before, but like, why not pitch them?
Right.
Yeah. And so I cold emailed, got a response. Next thing you know, I'm in their offices on 57th Street in New York, pitching it to the team.
I was so blown away by the story. So what did that look like? What was that process look like? And what were the results and learning lessons?
Yeah. Oh, so many learning lessons. I mean, the amazing thing about my time at Tocca was that I was given a lot of freedom. But because of that, I was kind of like my own entity within the brand. It was actually a clothing company when I started. And so their whole thesis was, hey, we want to get into lifestyle. And they had already started dabbling into candles and a little bit of personal care, but they really wanted to like take a minute and like do a deep dive. And so that's when I came in 2005. And so at that point, there was still like a little baby nugget there, but not much. And so then, so at that point, when I reached out to Sephora, I tried to kind of figure out who to reach out to, met with them via email, even back then, because I feel like I'm ancient, and they were so receptive. I was even, I think, so young at the time that I went in without the jitters, because there's certain things in my life where I look back on and I'm just like, how did I do that? Like, honestly, like knowing how nervous I get about things now. And I think it's just that like bright-eyed, like how you are when you're in your 20s, it's just like anything is possible.
And you don't know the weight of it. Like you don't know, like you just don't get it. Like you just don't know which is good. I think about when I remember approaching the beauty director at Glamour in the elevator and like introducing myself. And I'm like, would I have done that now? I mean, actually, maybe I would have, but that was just so like ballsy and so like who has the chutzpah to do that?
Well, and I think even to your point about like, okay, maybe we would do it now, but we wouldn't be so ticked and tired.
Yes.
I went in there without a plan. I was like, we don't even have real fragrances, like the final bottles. Like I had a mock-up, I had lab samples, and then I had this world. And that's when I started to kind of connect the dots of the fact that I was both right and left brained, because of it's like 1 minute I'm kind of helping curate this whole Tocca story and the romance. And I was handed an amazing story from one of the original founders of Tocca, Eduardo Mantelli. And he was really at the beginning such a mentor to me. Everything he said, I mean, he was Italian born, so it was almost just like everything he said was so poetic. And I just was like absorbing. But then at the same time, working through, okay, what is the process of creating and designing a bottle and even the fragrances. We had an amazing partnership with Givaudan. They really championed, obviously, when quantities were zero.
Right.
And so then ultimately went in, pitched it, and not only did they bring it on for, I believe we started with 10 doors and end caps.
Wow.
And at the time we launched, they loved the design of the bottle so much that it actually became the centerpiece for their holiday campaign. So for those of you out there that have been long time Sephora,
I'm pretty
the whole circus theme.
Yes.
And literally, the bottle was like, they were full. I mean, it was just crazy. Yeah. And again, at the time, I was like, oh, that's cool. That's nice of you guys. Like, no co-op fees, no sales expectations. Like, I look back and I'm like, what?
That's amazing.
That would be like $100,000 co-op fee plus, one of my limbs and whatever. But so then that started that journey of understanding the ins and outs of working with Sephora, from building out and because we were privately owned, cash, we had to be very, very tight and really smart about how we spent money and where we spent it. And
where did you spend it where you felt like, okay, that was money really well spent?
At the very beginning, it was that custom design bottle. I mean, we put a lot of investment in that because it was one of those things where how can we kind of quickly come out with something that's iconic. And it really became a part of the origin story of Tocca Beauty. I mean, those first girls, Cleopatra, Stella, and Florence, they were the beginnings of the Tocca girls.
Yes.
And what I like to say is sometimes they were my first 3 born children. I'm sure any product developer and founder can relate.
Feels the same,
Yeah. And I mean, I would say that's honestly the big thing, and supporting the Sephora partnership, because at that time, remember, this is back in 2005, 2006, 2007. It is a totally different world back then than it is right now, especially from my marketing perspective and brand discovery. And I remember at the time, Anthropology really wanted us, and we held off because it was like, this is what we can handle. Right. And eventually we went into Anthro and became their top selling fragrance brand. But, Sephora, it was like, okay, if we're going to do this and go this route, we're going to make this route successful.
Okay. So really diving in deep into the relationship and doing the things that needed to be done to make those first 10 doors successful.
Exactly. And then obviously there was success there, and that rolled out, to a couple hundred doors. And
what were you given numbers, metrics that you needed to meet, or was it more self-driven? Because I know, of course, now they always have these numbers for every quarter, but was that the case then?
What was interesting is that there were numbers, but we were meeting and exceeding so much that I never felt the pressure.
Okay.
It was a big part of us kind of driving that early success was obviously how we designed the end cap, number 1. And then 2 was education. And that was one of the things I loved about Sephora. We would do SBs, the Sephora educational summits, and
love that.
Hendersonville, and really connecting with the cast members and making it as personal to them as it is to us. And that's the thing about Tocca, that the pure magic of it is the storytelling. Because every girl, every one of us is a Tocca girl at some point, and even the point during the day. And so it was really that connecting the emotion, and then also just having beautiful fragrances that we created that really resonated those stories beyond just what was written in black and white.
I mean, the packaging is iconic. I can picture it right now in my head. Years later, I haven't seen that. I haven't intentionally sought out the brand, but yet I can picture it in a matter of a second. I remember all of the 3 girls. Yeah. So tell me, okay, you've been behind brands that are worth tens of millions. What's one moment that felt like completely surreal where you thought like, oh my God, I can't believe this is even happening?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one.
I'm sure there's many.
Yeah, honestly, one of the things that I just innately love for just personally is seeing something come to fruition. And when I would have friends text me in photos of any of the products I worked on in the marketplace, I'd be like, oh my gosh, look, I see what you've been working on, and like connecting the dots, because no one really ever knew what I did. Still don't think they do.
I don't think anyone knows what I do.
But they can
either.
It's just like, where do I begin? But honestly, more than an industry accolade or something, in that regard, I feel like the biggest thing was just like that validation and that just awareness of people in my life that were like, wait, and they were almost the ones that coming to me that were kind of level setting reality of like, wait, what? You're doing this and you're in Sephora? Like, that's a big deal. Oh, really? Yeah. So it was like, really that support. But then, with Tocca, it's like we were in 40 something freestanding stores in Japan. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite projects was working with a Japanese architect working on our Ginza, where I was like, it was a pinch myself moment where it was just like, what? Like, how am I now doing this?
Right.
And that's where I really kind of honed in on my love of startups and that energy and you never live the same day. There is not a punching number, rinse and repeat. Every single day was different. It was like, oh, today we're designing an anchor. Cool. Okay, today we're entering a new product category. Cool. Today we're talking to an architect in Japan. So amazing.
So what was your title there?
Yeah, I always laugh. So I started, my titles have never matched. Done.
Yeah, I
started everything was like marketing and planning.
Okay.
So that's where I honed all of the planning and product development. And then from that, I went to, and I think I was at that title for 8 years, which was comical because at that point I had built the brand so large. And that was another thing where friends and family would be like, so nothing's changed with your title. I'm like, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter to me because I'm doing what I love.
Right.
But then I became vice president, product development, and creative director. Ultimately, really playing that 360. There wasn't really much of the business I didn't have a hand in and wasn't driving and building. Obviously had an amazing team. And it was one of those where we were super scrappy, super small team. Built into a very big business. It wasn't as quick as current day brands are being built. However, it was privately funded and we were making the right decisions.
That's amazing.
And so it was just, it really was incredible and it was really magical. And honestly, I don't think I would have ever really left because that was my heart and soul. And I was a Tocca girl through and through.
What made you leave?
Then, as we all do, I got a LinkedIn message from somebody who was at a direct sales jewelry company. She was the creative director, and they were looking to get and expand into other categories. So they saw what I did at Tocca, where it really started as a clothing brand that was being sold at Saks and Bergdorf's and was really successful. Models like Kate Moss were wearing the little dresses. And by the time I got this LinkedIn message, it was full-fledged beauty brand. And so they saw that. So they were like, hey, can we do it? We had the lunch. Next thing you know, I have a call with the CEO. And it was kind of given an opportunity I couldn't turn away from. It was probably one of the most excruciatingly difficult decisions because a lot of it was I had to really swallow the fear. It was one of those things of I had only done Tocca. Prior to Tocca, I was designing, I was at Manola Blahnik. So it was I had done the shoe thing. Then I moved to Tocca and it was what if I'm a one-trick pony? What if this is what I can do? And I remember, my partner at the time, and he was just like, no, you, this is so good for you. Because the things that excited me about this other opportunity were a few things. One, it was technically a tech company.
Okay.
So they had their own proprietary stack. It was VC backed. I didn't even know what VC stood for. I was learning curve. It was direct sales. So it was a whole new.
Too.
Yeah. And then the fourth was that it was jewelry, that it was something new. So even like the thing that was like most exciting about it in some respects was actually the least exciting for me because I saw all these other things. And this was back in 2015 when there was really that shift to digital. And I knew that I just knew in my gut, I was like, if I want to kind of get to the 21st century here, I need digital. Yeah, I need to learn. And so I left Tocca, moved to Chloe and Isabel, which was a direct sales jewelry company, thousands of women across the US selling the jewelry. And I was actually hired on in a very narrow role, actually. It was head of product development and design.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, which I liked because I was like, okay, this allows me to kind of be in the background on a few things.
Yes.
And then learn a totally new way of producing, designing on one side. And the thing from a design perspective that I loved was instead of kind of designing to a buyer, right? To like the like the Barney's buyer, for example, you're having to design to thousands of women that are selling the jewelry. So all of them have to buy into it.
Right.
But then who they are selling to is more than likely a different cohort.
Interesting. Wow.
So how do you design into them and keep the true essence of the storytelling and the magic of the brand intact without looking like you're trying to be something for everyone, right? And you start to like lose that sight of identity.
Yeah.
And I loved that challenge because
so how did you solve for it? I'm so curious now.
So ultimately making the foundational story stronger, because if it resonated, if just the brand story, as long as we were super strong with the brand story, then that was going to reflect itself in the jewelry designs. And as such, it should be universal because jewelry is much easier to sell, especially online and digitally, because you don't have to smell it. You don't have a texture. You don't have that whole sensation. So with the jewelry, and I had such a dream team in terms of designers. I mean, they each one brought their A game and then some. I mean, I'm still in contact with all of them.
Amazing.
And yeah, I mean, they're all rock stars, but they really each brought their own personality to it. And then as such, it trickled down to the designs.
So I have a follow-up question on that, because I know you and I talked about how beauty's this whole other beast. You've, been in jewelry, you've been in shoes. Yeah. And then, and of course, beauty. How is beauty just on another level, another beast?
It's in a category of itself. I've actually tried hiring into beauty from people that did almost like the exact same thing in ready-to-wear clothing, and quickly realized it was not a one-for-one translation.
Wow.
And I've just learned over the course of my life that someone in beauty can acclimate pretty much into any category, because beauty is so difficult versus coming into beauty. It takes a very specific skill set.
Yeah.
And it can, which when you find the rock stars, you want to hold on to them.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many things in beauty that make it more complicated, whether it's the lead times because of development, the testing, the regulation, .com native, or if they have freestanding stores, like crossing that barrier of how do you get someone to buy a fragrance online.
There's also this nuance of story. There's this whole other layer of storytelling that has to have this emotional aspect. And certainly that's the case, I think, to a degree with other products. But it's got to be like, so much of it is about how it makes you feel versus like how it looks or what it does. Yes, skincare that's clinical might be about what it does, but like, what's the whole reason why someone's using that or reaching for that product in the first place, right?
And especially in a market that has so many freaking products.
Yeah, that's the other part.
I mean, it's insanity. So it's like, how do you cut through that noise, and how do you stand out? And that's really hard for the little guys, which is why I've been their champion for the last 10 years, because it's the little ones that you see the innovation, you see them taking the time, but they're the ones that are not getting the money. They're the ones that can't afford the ad spend, because you have the Estee Lauders and the L'Oreals spending so much on Meta and Google and all the things.
So then what does it take like for a young brand to stand out? Like, as someone who architects brands, obviously it's so much more than just like fonts and mood boards. So what does it mean to build a real brand and position it in a way that it does stand out, especially for brands that are indie and self-funding?
Yeah. So the way that I look at brand architecture is a little bit different than I think most do. And for me, I look at it like an actual architect. So when you think about someone building a house and the foundation you have to build, and then obviously eventually you get to the curb appeal. But for me, it's working with brands that from the very beginning, I mean, I work with brands that are pre-market, pre-revenue up to 30 million, but ultimately those early stage ones are the ones that are always like close to my heart, because I know that I can get them set up with a foundation to scale. And one of my first questions with founders is always, what is your goal? Do you want to pass this on to your children? Do you want to have like just a really healthy $5 million business a year where you're making a great salary and you're going on vacations? Do you want to sell it in three? Depending on what that is, that's going to determine how that foundation.
Okay.
Because everything is going to be built from that foundation.
Yes. Okay.
Now, it doesn't mean you can't. Well, it doesn't mean you can't change your mind along the way.
Yeah.
But you don't have the freedom to change your mind if you haven't proven success of that original foundation.
Okay, great. So knowing my founders that are in our community, a lot of them, yes, there's definitely some that want to build the way that I define it is like a lifestyle business versus an enterprise business. And so there's certainly, some that want to build that enterprise style business, which means like basically growing as quickly as possible, reinvesting your funds, potentially getting investment and growing it to exit, as quickly as possible. Versus lifestyle, where, like you said, you're growing it to that 5 million, you're able to pull out of the business a salary and et cetera. And knowing, our founders, majority are self-funded women, founders who are more wanting to build that lifestyle style type of business. So what would, in your opinion, what would that foundation look like to build something like a $5 million business?
It always starts with cost of goods. And this is where like the right and left brain kind of ignite, because there's a creative way of doing cost of goods. A lot of times I come in to a brand, even very early, where they're like, oh, I negotiated 10,000 MOQ. And I'm like, no, girl, like we're going to renegotiate. It's going to be 2,500. It's going to be this. We're going to keep the price, so it's really about setting the stage early on, especially the tone, right? It's like in all relationships, right? It's kind of like you teach people how to treat you kind of a thing. Same thing with founders and vendors. Vendors can sniff out a newbie and they usually don't like it when I come in, because then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, this is not how it's done. Like, that's cute, but we're not going to do that.
Funny. Okay, tell me more.
It's just like, yeah. So it's because ultimately cost of goods equals what your margin is. And that tells me how much we could spend. So you start there, but obviously the founder has an idea, whether it's a product, like a physical one, a digital one, whatever that is. So it's honing in on that. And if that founder is like, I have an idea, but I need to further figure out who that audience is or the price point, then I have amazing partners that I reach out to. I think one of them, Rachel Maddox, was on. And I have that I lean to where I'm like, hey, you need to focus on this, get this set. Once we kind of know what that price point is, like, do you want to sell in Walmart and Amazon, or do you want to sell doors and have a sense of scarcity? And that gives us a retail. And then from there, it's like, okay, how much can we afford? What is that cost of goods? And operationally ensuring that is so sound, because at some point, if that brand ever wants to raise money, these are all things investors are going to be looking at.
Of course.
And I'm just going to be like, here, it's done. Here's your preliminary modeling. This is how much money you need. So kind of going back to that, where I start, it's always with that nugget of the brand and then pricing. So it is that like left and right brain balance. Sometimes people focus too much on one or the other, but it has to be a balance.
So just to kind of piggyback off that, would you say that then, if someone was looking to build a lifestyle brand, that it would behoove them to have healthier margins, more wiggle room in margins, less SKUs, like kind of working in that direction versus making it more accessible, like you said, Walmart, or Target, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to funds too, right? So if they're very limited on budget, the number one thing is like manage your SKUs. Like there are brands where all of a sudden I'm like, okay, girl, like you want to launch like 10 SKUs. Like, do you understand that that's 10 components? Like the inventory, just it all comes down to risk. So my best advice for kind of going in that direction in terms of you're in it for the long haul, that's kind of how I look at that. It's like a journey. Find success early, where it's like focus on getting $1 million SKU.
Yeah,
because again, it's like if you're launching 5 SKUs and you're a brand that just is launching and you're launching 5 SKUs, you get all this press. That won't happen.
That's okay. I try to explain this. I can't even agree with you. I try to explain, like sometimes founders will come to me that they're like, I want to launch these 5 SKUs at the same time. And I'm like, but that's 5 opportunities for activation events or activation moments or launch moments where you can get media, you can get attention, new customer, new eyeballs, new, like a reason to buy again, right? Like you don't want to like throw all the eggs into one early basket when you have your smallest audience, right?
100%. Like you are literally, think about those 5 products in a backpack and you're hiking up a hill. Do you know how hard it is to get to the top of that hill? And it also costs the same, like it's focus your money.
Yes.
Focus.
Yes. I can't agree more.
Like even if you launch with one, and my whole thing with just my philosophy on brands launching in general is don't focus on the day you're turning the lights on. That day means nothing. I create full year. There needs to be a full year plan of giving people a reason to talk about you.
Yes. Absolutely.
So it's not just like, oh yeah, exciting. We got all these sales. We launched like, and then it's like, well, we spent all our money on that. We can't do this. This crazy cool opportunity just arrived. We can't do it because we just spent it on the 5 products and the whole launch party, whatever, versus being very systematic with, thinking through, well, first and foremost, every brand should have their own very bespoke marketing strategy. People are always like, so what's like the go-to? I'm like, there is no go-to because, and anyone that thinks that there's a kind of typical route, they need to change their mindset.
Yeah.
Because every brand has different needs, 100%. Messaging, customers, so on and so forth. You can definitely have competitors in the marketplace that you're looking to where you're like, wow, they've like done something really well. And like look at that as like inspiration. But you have to look internally and see. And so when I'm thinking about just like a brand launch from 0 to that first 12 months, it's like, okay, if we're turning on the lights July 1, what's happening in July? What's happening in August? What's happening in September?
Yeah.
All the way around. And then to me, launch is 12 months. That is what it takes to truly establish that foundation to then be able to like grow.
Love that perspective.
And then also, if you spend all your money on like the 5 SKUs of this, that, or the other, then you do miss out on really cool opportunities that could come once you do launch.
Yes. And you will have those, many of those, and there will be, the market will respond, right? So the market then responds. And if you go ahead and do all of those 5 SKUs, that all the packaging for it, everything from the get-go, you launch everything, the market responds, but they're only responding to actually this other product, or they're asking for a complementary product to one of the products that you have that isn't part of those 5 SKUs. Well, you can't even deliver on that, right? You could have delivered on it if you just started with that 1 SKU or just 2. So I couldn't agree more. I love taking a very curated approach, and I think it just makes it so much easier and more streamlined and more simplified for especially a young founder, first-time founder, to limit it. But so many founders love creating new products. So it's like really in.
It's that like teaching of patience and like restraint.
Yes, restraint. Love that.
Which is also why some people refer to me as like the founder whisperer. Because I'll like come in and I'm just like,
I love that.
I'm like, yes, confetti toss. Run, but it's the one major thing for any of us. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. That's just plain and simple. And so same with like this kind of thing, where focus on what you know is going to drive home the messaging of your brand and is going to convert with that customer that you're targeting. And let's just say this is a situation where it's the same product for 5 cents, like a body lotion or something. Then right now already you are cutting your losses immediately, or cutting your wins, immediately, because you're giving people too many choices.
Absolutely.
So instead of focusing on 3, you've just given them 5. And then if we're talking about skincare, so many women out there already have their routine. So ultimately, what you're trying to do as a brand is convince them why they need to insert your product.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And then when you launch with 5, and then it's like, oh wait, this is so complicated. Like I already have my routine.
Right.
Like, no, actually use this for this. This falls seamlessly into it, and then you gain that confidence, and then you can really work from a PD perspective.
It's also easier for retail pitching too. You can say, hey, this is actually a great compliment to XYZ, what you already have, not like, oh, try and take in our whole line. And we're seeing that in Sephora too. You have your favorites, like your best new, and certainly as you grow, you need more SKUs, but in the beginning, just to enter a space, you don't need a whole line. Let me ask you, what would you say, in addition to having way too many SKUs, what are some other 1 or 2 brand killers that you've seen over and over again?
I'm not keeping your eye on who you are. It goes back to like trying to be something for everyone. And as a brand that evolves, so usually this is when they hit the like $1 to $3 million range, when you're really starting to have those major conversations with like the major retailers. Retailers love to give advice.
Oh yeah.
When they're like, we need this and we need this and do this. And then of course, as a young founder or young brand, you feel a lot of pressure to give advice. And I think that causes brands to go astray, because the more you start to go away from kind of what that initial, just the brand ethos in general, the further away you get from that, the further away customers get from your brand. Because then when they start to see it, it's like they can't comprehend what isn't fitting, but they get it. Like something just isn't fitting.
Something's not.
So I would say that would be a big one.
One thing is not like the other. One of these shapes is not like the others.
100%. And then the other thing is just spending where brands have a tendency to spend money. Unfortunately, there's a lot of brands that raise money and they just think the money's always going to be there. And just being really fiscally responsible. And that doesn't mean like don't spend the money, but especially for founders out there that are currently raising, and I know you've worked really hard on your pitch deck and all the ways you're going to use the money when you've raised it.
Yeah.
I always tell brands when I'm in this process with them, where it's like, by the time you raise the money, you're probably going to be spending it on something different. What? But I'm like, sometimes it doesn't take a long time to get cash, and then that is reality. But then other times it's not. So then it's like, okay, where's the business right now? What exactly do we need? And let's not put investor money into product. POs, that's what debt financing is for. Like, you want any money you're bringing in to go towards driving revenue.
Absolutely.
Versus just getting stuck in a warehouse until it gets pushed out.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of financing, you've raised, 14 million for brands. You've also seen investors advice rec companies. So what are some like big red flags for founders who are, seeking out investing and investors? And what are some sort of like things to look out for when money's on the table?
Well, first and foremost, every founder needs to know their business inside and out. And I know that that's a very scary thing, because there's a lot of new nomenclature when it comes to fundraising. There are sometimes I even tell founders not to raise, depending on what their business looks like, because they're killing it as is. So sometimes I think they kind of feel like it's almost like you feel like you have to take that next step because everybody's fundraising. But like, if you can go and not fundraise, that's the ideal, because when you start taking other people's money, the game changes.
Right.
And so in terms of red flags for founders looking at investing or investment from outside investment, my big thing is many people don't realize there's actually strategy in fundraising, where what is the best way to get to money and what type of money do we need? And then also a lot of conversations I have with founders, they're like, so we're raising 1.5 million, blah, 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 and they go through their spiel. And I'm like, well, how did you get to the 1.5 million? And then they just kind of look at me and they're like, well, we think, I'm like, no. Like, I want to see the model. Like, you're asking for 1.5. How long is that going to last? How did you even get to the 1.5? Oftentimes people are thinking too small, depending on how big their business is. And so that's a big thing too, of just like understanding that. But red flags with regards to, because I've definitely told brands to say no to checks, which is always a tough conversation when you're cash and money and you have someone willing to write you a $1 million, $2 million check. And that usually comes in the form of just really bad deals. People that are just willing, any investor that's willing to take a big chunk, a big percentage of your business is one to stay away from. You have to think that at the time, if this is your first raise, you're in the nascent stage of the business. So you are allowing not a lot of blue sky for future investors. And number two, what motivation is there for you as the founder to stay with the brand if you are slowly getting cut out? So a lot of times I always say, like, I'm going to get in front of a train for you. Like, I'm going to fight so that you get the best deal possible. And there are times where it's just like I lay out all the pros and cons of the deal, and ultimately it's the founder's choice. But it's ultimately what's going to be best for the brand, not just right now, because that's the hard part too. Because I get it. I've been a founder. I get like having the bills stack up, needing to raise the money, trying to figure it out. You have someone offering money. Like, how do you say no to that in a time when you're like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills professionally or personally? Like I feel the founder battle personally. And so it's hard. But then also if it comes down to that, every founder has to dig deep from the very beginning, because it takes a lot of guts to say, I'm going to do something on my own and I'm going to make it happen. It is very often a lonely road. And so even through the bad times, you have to come back to that and know, like, I have something special here. Someone with the right money is going to come. And you just have to like head down and keep chugging, even as painful as it can get sometimes. And the money will come. Yeah. The thing is, money is out there. It's just about the right matchmaking. It's just finding the right person at the right time and finding those investors that are actually going to support you. Right. Because there are some that, and everyone loves like the VC PE thing, but depending on what stage you're at, I'm just like, no, you're going to angels, high wealth individual, or family offices where you don't have the crazy stakes.
So speaking of which, you said something that I wanted to call out and go a little bit further for those who are listening to what you just shared about. You said once you get, investor involved, the game changes. So can you clarify for our audience or for our listeners what that means, what changes, and what happens once you get that money in hand?
Yeah. So up until then, you are the one that's been driving the business. You're the one that has been driving the decisions, especially the big ones. Obviously, whether you have a team or not, you're still the head of the company. Now, when you start taking other people's money, especially if it's the VC private equity, so I do want to kind of clarify that, the level of expectation changes exponentially. You now have a board that you're rolling up into that you have to perform for. And whether it's metrics, whatever those KPIs are, those expectations are that you sold to them in that pitch deck, or what those expectations are, it just ups the ante exponentially. So if, let's just say you're in the middle of fundraising and you're in your third conversation with Sephora and you're using that as a part of your pitch, as you should. Like, we're having very warm conversations. They're super excited about it. When fill in the blank, it could be Target, it could be whomever. And okay, great, you secure the funds. And so then that expectation's there. And then Sephora's like, oh my gosh, you know what? We've decided to shift things. And now we're no longer focusing on clean sun care, but we're focusing on perimenopausal skincare. We'll get back to you. Yeah. And then what do? Because you have certain sales expectations, certain things. Right. So then at that point, it's like, okay. And that, in that instance, that is why who you choose to take money from is so important. Because if it's a good partner, then they get it. And they're going to be like, okay, cool, that sucks, but bring us the new strategy, and you got to be ready.
Right.
And so
and that's the good
not
part.
that you don't, and then the bad ones are like
Clock's ticking.
and then that gets us into like, what kind of money did you bring in? Did you bring in a safe note? Did you bring them out?
Yeah.
And all of that, where it's like there are really mean people that are like, I gave you 800,000, I gave you a year to recoup it, and then the brand's gone. So again, if you're fundraising, you're having so many conversations with investors, and if you are getting that far along in some of them, you really get to know people. Like who's showing up on time, who's giving you eye contact, even like on a Zoom, who's just like over here, like like you get a sense of. And I always try to make sure that the brands I'm working with actually meet the investor in person.
Oh yeah,
because some of my brands are like in Europe, so it's hard. But when possible, I think that is huge too, because I'm very much an instinct aura. Yes, where it's like, okay, how do you feel? Because again, this is when you take someone's money, it's a very intimate relationship.
Yeah,
because they're going to see everything. It's like there's no hiding misadventures on the wrong path. It's like
This is such a great conversation. Is there, like, if you had your own brand, you're starting your own brand, and you knew what you knew about getting funding, how would you go about it? Would you wait to reach a certain EBITDA before you reached out to investors?
That's a good question. I mean, it really depends. I mean, ultimately, I would try to go without having a raise. That's the goal.
Same. 110%.
Not getting ahead of my skis, which is hard, because even when you know the pitfalls and the like booby traps, you can still fall into them when it's your own thing and you're like excited and you're like, oh, but it's not going to happen to me.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wah, wah, wah. But ideally, I would try to self-fund as much as I can, but I know that that's not always an option. And so then I always leave to friends and family first, where it's like, okay. And then that also comes down to building that strong, like the beginning of the architecture, the footing, if you will, where it's like, what do I need for proof of concept? Do I need to have 5 SKUs? Maybe I do. Maybe I have a 5-step system. Can I just start with 1 or 2 where I'm limiting my own financial, but I can at least test and I can really drive cash towards brand messaging and who are we, what are we, and why are we connecting?
Who are we?
Like, to me, that's like the trifecta. And if you can do that in a way that easily translates via product, visuals, and maybe even and obviously copy, you can do it. But I think when you can do that and communicate that via products and or visuals, that's cute, because people don't have time to sit there and read a dissertation of like, this is, it's like, you can definitely have a place on there on the site for it, for people that really want to like dive in and understand. But ultimately, you only have, again, going back to like how tight the marketplace is. So it's like, what do you have? So again, kind of going back to where should they spend the money? Spend the money on killing it with 1 or 2 products.
Yes, absolutely.
Even if you do want to get into retailers, they're going to see traction.
So the numbers, anyways. So you might as well focus on the first 2, or the a couple, instead of like spreading your audience thin amongst like 5 SKUs that are lukewarm.
100%. And that feedback that you're going to get, like you said, could pivot you, and that you could have never thought of, that you were so wrapped up in the 5 SKUs.
So if you can give like one piece of advice, one brutal truth to a room full of early stage founders, what would you tell them? So
a brutal truth would be, know your lane. There are a lot of founders that think that they can be CMOs or CEOs or whatever. And some of them can't. But the founder that recognizes what their strengths are and what is one that I would personally invest in.
Yeah.
The ones that come and they're like, I can do all these things and and it's just like, okay, but you need a support system. What does that look like? How do you envision that? Because eventually, and maybe again, this is not a part of their goal, but eventually you want to scale up, right? You want to get bigger.
Right.
So the jack of all trades is awesome at the beginning, but then really understanding, like, you know what, my end goal is to get an operator in here.
Right.
So that I can do the stuff I know I'm good at.
Right.
That's all forward facing and doing all these things. So, and sometimes that's a really hard journey to like reconcile.
Yeah. And the importance of just knowing that there is the visionary and there's the operator. I think that a lot of founders, especially if they're new to entrepreneurship, are not familiar with that concept of like, there's typically a visionary and there's an operator, and there you may be those two roles in the beginning, but you in the end need those two roles need to exist both equally. And typically the entrepreneur is the visionary more than the operator usually. But it's knowing that, okay, like there needs to be, like, you need to outline, if you're that one person, you still need to outline like your visionary role and then your operator role. And you need to be doing essentially both in the beginning if it's just you and you can't. Yeah.
Yeah. And figuring out some founders it's funny because it is, I say it's lonely because it's a journey that even if you have a co-founder, it's one that you are really doing internally as well, because there's nothing that holds a mirror up to your strengths and your weaknesses like launching a brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's no hiding. So it's hard. And some people that are like, I'm the visionary, then they kind of realize I'm actually kind of better on the outside. You know, it's like an interesting journey to see. But and then in which case, kind of further to this, and kind of my ending thing on the advice or the call out would be, don't lose sight of the vision. Like, don't lose sight of the magic that everyone's buying into.
Absolutely.
You know, when you look at brands like Glossier, lost the magic. When it's like really any brand, I should say, that's just like most little brands that are bought up by Estee, L'Oreal. Yeah, they lose the plot, and that's why they fade away.
I do want to put a pin in, what you said, which I think was really important, emphasizing knowing yourself really well. I think really doing a lot of, like, even just taking those personality tests that exist, like the Colby tests or Enneagram, or, there's so many different like tests now for your skill sets that can call out your skill sets. And I know when I took those, it was really transformative in my business because I was able to see where my zone of genius lies. And I think one of the things that when I was growing my brand, my co-founder was my husband, and I didn't understand, like, we didn't know yet at the time. We were like 24, 25, something like, we were in our 20s, and we didn't know ourselves well enough to know what role we played. So we kept swapping back and forth, which was not good, right? There's got to be someone who's a visionary, someone who's the operator. And now I know, right? And it's like clear as night and day because I did the work. But I think it's really, really important that you do understand yourself so well, and you're able to say, I know I'm not good at in this area. I need to hire. That's like my first hire. Okay. And then the next area that I'm the worst at is my second hire. So filling the gaps.
Like, I need a finance person.
Right. Exactly. So, all right. So I guess like the last question I want to ask before we sort of conclude this is there one sort of underrated superpower that a founder could have that has nothing to do with like being good at business that you've seen really would help?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like an underlying grit, perseverance.
Yeah,
like being able to just and it doesn't have to be kind of undulating, it just needs to be this like steady self-confidence that you're willing to do whatever it takes to stand behind. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether it's parenting, coaching a soccer team, building a business. It's like that, just every day. It's that consistency and driving towards whatever that goal is, because honestly, no one's going to care as much about it as you are. And you have to remember that.
Absolutely.
So if you start to waver,
That's great point. Great thing to end on. And tell me, Kathryn, how can people find you? How can people work with you? Like, give us the details.
Yeah, you can find me on my website, which is brand-architect.com, or my email, which is Kathryn@brand-architect.com.
Amazing.
And I'm also on Instagram. My handle is the Style Skinny.
Amazing. This is a Style Skinny. And what are you working on right now that's exciting you?
Yeah, so I recently stepped into co-CEO role with Virginia Skin, which I'm super excited about.
So fun.
Still, I have 2 brands launching this year, both in skincare, one LA based, one New York City based. I have started my venture studio with my partner, Michelle Lee, who was the ex-editor-in-chief of Allure magazine and at Netflix, and which we're super excited about. Our thesis is basically, bringing money, not just with equity, to these smaller brands. And I can, if you don't mind, if I read my little thesis line for Areum Ventures, where the beauty of cultural intuition and operational excellence unlocks enduring value in how you live, heal, and connect. So the brands we work with are all going to kind of fall within that.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Sharing all your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience. It's been amazing. And for those of you who are listening, if you love this episode, leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Beauty and the Brand podcast. Bye, everyone.